Welcome to Living Umpqua, the UAP UFO Rabbit Hole Show. I am so glad you tuned back in. This episode is going to be quite interesting. We're actually going to talk about future humans. Before we get there, though, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos and updates like this, and it really helps my channel to grow. Moving on, future humans. If you go back to episode 3, which actually I think wound up around episode 5 or 6, it got lost. In fact, I had to title it The Lost Episode because something happened in the time parallel YouTube video upload paradox, and the video didn't upload the right way. It uploaded, got lost, came back from some other timeline. I don't know. It's super crazy. You'll have to watch the video to check it out. Here we are today in this current episode, in this current timeline, and Dan Burisch is still relevant. In fact, that video had a lot of interest. It got one of the higher views of all of my videos. In my research of Dan Burisch, I started to find out that there's another gentleman out there named Dr. Michael P. Masters, who he's actually written a couple books and several papers on how aliens, extraterrestrials, may actually be future humans, traveling through time, working also with other future humans to try to kind of maintain this timeline, reality, and really our existence in life. Absolutely fascinating stuff. I would like you to check out this video. It's kind of a comparison with Dan Burisch's claims going way back to the 90s, and then Michael Masters' story. He actually is an anthropological specialist, and his specialty is in ocular cavities. So, how humans would evolve, what their facial structures would look like, and in particular, the ocular area.
There are two or more concurrent timelines that we're living in. Two separate existences.
Watching this interview with Dan Burisch, who claims to have worked with the J-Rod, taking biological samples and stuff. And, his story is compelling. I'm on the fence, but there's a lot of details in it that seem to indicate that what he's saying is accurate. I don't know, a number of body language cues and things too. But yeah,
We're talking about the doctrine of the convergent timeline.
Yeah, the convergent timeline.
From what I understand, from what I've read, and from the conversations which I've been privy, we are in fact living in a chimera, a reality chimera. The reality timeline that we would normally associate with moving from A to B, cause to effect, with the nexus being the passage of clock time. Errors that we made in our future to attempt to go back into our past to correct the problems of our future. It hodgepodges together, in a real sense to us, those things which happened are to happen in the future with our present timeline due to an interruption of the time stream. Instead of splitting into two time streams, what happened is as soon as we mucked around with something, we overlaid a second time stream into the present reality. Time stream upon time stream.
Okay, I see what you're saying. A loop within a loop.
Yes, more of what I would, from my framework, say if you're moving from A to B, looping like this, following the catastrophe.
Right.
Following the catastrophe, there is a split between those individuals who take a more spiritual path and would move forward to places such as the Moon and Mars, and then onward from there to Orion.
Mm-hmm.
And those folks who take a more rudimentary path because it's the alleged spiritual nature of humankind from their philosophy at that time, which led us to not deal with the pressing problems of the day because we were too busy fighting our petty religious battles, that then go off into a more logical, mathematical, numerological philosophy. Those folks who then progress slower because of the lack of ambition, the lack of spiritual ambition, then gradually moving on to the reticulum, the mass area, who then become the J-rods.
We covered this a bit in our last episode about Dan Burisch. Essentially, the theory is that there's a great catastrophe on Earth. Humans kind of split into two different groups. So you have one group that takes kind of a spiritual enlightenment path and somehow is able to get off Earth and avoid this type of catastrophe. And then you have this other group called the J-rods that, because of whatever this catastrophe was on Earth, they had to then go underground. But both kind of break off species still evolved over thousands and thousands of years. And that's why you have kind of these two different groups that have tapped into traveling through space and hence time to try and accomplish goals. And of course, they all sort of have their own agendas. For instance, the J-rods, having gone underground and living underground for so long and dealing with that kind of existence, almost want to justify that life. So it's almost to the J-rod's benefit for some type of catastrophe to happen to justify their own history. Now, the Orions, since they took more of a spiritual path and got off Earth, that doesn't really matter so much to them. Because there's all of these different special interest groups from the future and the present and even the past, it turns out, we had to develop some type of treaty system. If you go down the Dan Burisch rabbit hole online, you will find lots of documents on said treaty system. If you leave a comment below you'd like me to review that stuff, I would be happy to. It's pretty fascinating, and we delve a little bit into it further in the video here. Takeaway here, Dan Burisch believes P-45s are future humans from 45,000 years in the future that have been forced to live underground. And P-52s are future humans from 52,000 years in the future that took more of a spiritual path and live in space. Let's continue on here.
Now, they become, by what process? Is it some kind of radiational mutation that takes place?
The only thing I can say for sure, say for damn sure, is the interaction with the being that I had at Sector 4. Now, I can say nothing authoritatively about the peculiar adaptive radiation that occurred toward Orion, the spiritual half of the species, following the catastrophe. Aside from what, a few things I've read about it, and the J-rods undergo adaptive radiation to the form that we see presently. The word presently is kind of relative. It tends to exist now, but presently, due to time and exposure after they've moved off to reticulum.
So, in order to make interstellar travel feasible, we might also have to invent or figure out backward time travel so that we don't just get home to our planet, we also get home to our own time. So going a little bit further with this time aspect, it's also very possible that we do become extraterrestrial. So if we can exclude the extraterrestrial hypothesis strictly as a model that says there is a separate evolution on a separate planet, it's almost a 0% probability that we would have the same evolutionary trajectory that's so rare here on this planet. If we're talking about beings coming from other planets, we wouldn't expect them to be bipedal. They'd be built more like tanks with 6 to 8 legs, according to Bill Sellers, who is a biomechanist. I do think if we interject time into this, it becomes possible to understand how you could have the jinn, how you could have the gypsies, the fairies, the crypto-terrestrials, and all of the different ways that these beings, who may be the exact same beings coming back from the same times, who visit different periods, are perceived differently based on the technology and the understanding of people who exist in those times.
When he's talking about that would explain the jinn, the fairy, and all these other nefarious types of entities. Well, what he's talking about is what Dan Burisch even referred to, which was future humans, man, traveling back into time to then basically become gods through their technology that they're able to use. Pretty amazing to think about that. You know, if you were to show somebody back in the day, like in the 80s, an iPhone that you were to use today, it would be almost unbelievable what you were showing them. You would almost appear like either a magician or some insane tech genius, or maybe even some entity that has...
Well.
Whoa! What is going on here? Unknown
Yeah.
alien person.
Yeah.
What
You
happened
thought
to
you were just gonna
Unknown
do a
Caller
show
Man?
without me?
Where's Unknown Caller Man?
Don't worry about it.
Oh my gosh.
It's none of your business.
Unknown alien person. Well, welcome to the show.
You mean
We're happy you're
you're
here.
welcome that I let you be on the show.
Either way, I'm glad you're here.
Thanks.
I'm glad you're here.
Appreciate it.
So-
I heard you were talking some sort of whatever on this. Some sort of mess.
Yeah, we're talking about future humans actually being aliens.
Okay.
You got any thoughts on that?
I'm guessing you're going to show me something about it. Is that true?
We are watching a video on it, some snippets on it. Okay, very
Yeah.
good. Yeah, see, now, if you watch my last episode about Dan Burisch, then you know some of these theories about man traveling back into time and basically being worshipped by gods as gods because of the technology that they're using. And I was just explaining how if you were to take an iPhone and go back, it would blow people's mind what you showed them, right? Like you would, and that's just going back 20 years. Imagine if you could take an iPhone and go back 100 years, what that might look like for people.
I think they would just throw up.
Yeah, 100 years, they might burn you at the stake, right?
Oh,
For
yeah.
having an
Good
iPhone. I don't
Why'd you kill
know.
him? You had that phone.
It was,
And
what
none
would
of
they
that
call it?
business.
Witchcraft or,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know what they would call it, but
Witchcraft,
it's crazy to think about.
Absolutely.
If you took this type of time traveling technology, which means they probably have all kinds of other crazy technology, and went back
ATT,
thousands of
time
years,
travel technology.
the triple T,
Huh.
and went back thousands of years to add a fourth T, and and were basically worshipped like a god because of the technology. Yeah, people couldn't even wrap their heads around what you were able to do with that technology.
True story.
Being an unknown alien person,
That's me.
what's it like for you working with technologies that people don't understand?
Oh, it's exactly like you think it would be. There's two approaches to this, actually. One
Sure.
of the things I could tell you is that it's completely boring and mindless and numbing. But the other one is that you just don't even know that you're actually doing it, so it doesn't feel like anything.
So it's compartmentalized.
Sure, if you wanna call it that.
It's a special
out.
access program.
Yeah, that's what we call it,
Or-
a special access program.
Or a USAP, an unknown special access program,
Oh, okay.
right? Those exist. That's why the Pentagon, when they do their audits, have paper clips that cost $568 and stuff like that.
Oh, that money
Yeah.
got laundered.
No, don't say that word.
Oh, sorry.
Never.
Washed, cleaned.
Never.
Is that better?
Never our government.
Oh, no. Not ours.
Okay, so let's take a look. Let's we talked about Masters was breaking down how the human body could actually transform into what we now call like grays and some folks refer to as Orions, which is another species. So Masters breaks down how that actually is possible, and he's actually an anthropologist who's
I was going to say, you can't say that.
very well versed in this field. He looks at human evolution, and his specialty is the ocular cavity.
Oh, yeah, the eye guy.
Right. And
Yeah.
what's interesting about the ocular cavity is what we hear about all the aliens, which is that
Stop saying ocular cavity already. Completely uncomfortable.
I know I'm going to get canceled on YouTube.
Absolutely.
It's the big eyes. We hear about that all the time. The big head, the big eyes. And he's
two
saying
things.
he's saying, yeah, humans could definitely turn into that because our brains will get bigger and our
Vanilla.
cranium will grow. And because our brains will get bigger and our eyes are attached to our brain, the eyes will grow and things will change.
Okay.
Then if you stick us underground for 45,000 years, they'd probably turn black, right? Because you're hardly able to see anything.
Oh, okay.
It's all conjecture. It's all
Okay.
conjecture. But that's how it sort of aligns with what Dan Burisch says.
Classic DB.
So are you interested? Are you ready to watch the rest of this video?
Let's go.
Okay, let's go. Let's watch the
Bring it
rest of
on.
this video.
Let's try to impress me, Dan.
According to the doctrine of the convergent timeline paradox, the J-rods, to solve their paraprotein problem, used these ERBs to go back in time. And some of them were worshipped. They were treated as gods, and temples were built for them, and et cetera, et cetera. Initially, I was briefed that J-Rod was an alien, specifically from the reticulum system, to reticulum 4. I had no idea the truth. Yes, from 2 reticulum 4 now, but I had no idea the truth of how they came to be. As I said to you before, I have never met an alien, but I have met an extraterrestrial. He crashed in '63, from what I understand.
Oh, was that right?
Outside of Kingman,
Okay,
Arizona.
right.
There was a problem involving his physiology and his biophysiological communication with the craft went wrong. And of course, he's ill, as we know, with the MGUS and the paraprotein associated problems. And he crashed.
And how was he? Was he transported immediately from that crash site to the S4 facility? And how is
That I don't know.
okay?
That I don't know.
You don't know how he came to be at the facility.
I believe he and associates were transferred separately. He to the originally to the Groom Lake
facility, and an associate to, I believe, Los Alamos. I have no independent verification of where the associate went, though. All I can say is that he was there at Site 4. I would enter into the clean sphere, and I was not supposed to communicate with the J-Rod at all. I was not supposed to know his name. The reality is we were communicating from the time that I entered into the ambassadorial suite external to the clean sphere. They perceived that there was a communication that occurred. So I began getting questioned quite extensively whether or not he in fact was communicating with me, because he had promised not to, apparently, with the Sigma unit. And at that time, the deal was brokered to find out about the doctrine for the convergent timeline paradox. 3.5 feet, large head in comparison to torso. So the ratio of the cranial to the torso area would be larger than in what we would call a modern human being. Large, bulbous black eyes. The whites of the eyes had been selected out, so it looked like a large pupil. Called himself captive, and justifiably so. When I was with him, I felt great happiness to be with him, but I could feel his great sadness, not only because of what he wanted to become, what he knew he was by being present with us, but where he was.
That is a bummer. So the J-Rod was essentially kind of a voluntary prisoner who went through this super rough evolution process of having to live underground and probably survival of the fittest and all these awful things.
Oh, you think it was that bad?
I can't imagine living underground is great. I like the sky.
Yeah, that's true.
So he goes through all these awful things. He comes back in time, becomes kind of a voluntary prisoner, and then he gets to see what humans used to be and what he is
Classic.
now. I wonder what that's like. You know, that would be so strange. Going back and seeing a Neanderthal.
Huh, yeah.
Like what would that be like? Would we be bummed out that's not how we stayed, or would we be glad we've evolved into what we are?
I think we would be glad, right?
I don't know.
I don't know if glad's the right word.
I know I
Grateful.
did do one of those DNA tests, and I do have some Neanderthal in me. Clearly.
Oh, look at that tough brute man, everybody.
The gun show.
Should have cut them sleeves off.
Welcome to the gun show.
You got tickets?
So anywho, I think I just wanted to interrupt there because it is kind of sad, right? Like, if this is true, you had this individual, and in other videos, Dan Burisch makes it a point to say he refers to him as a person. It's a person. It's not a this. It's not a that. It's a person. And he says that, this person sacrificed themselves so that basically humanity could make it. Due to all of the crazy Project Aquarius and Project Lotus and all that stuff that we got into a little bit in my last video. What do you think?
So he's saying it's a person, a human from the future, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I can buy that. I think I can buy that.
I mean,
I like that.
I've heard Stranger Things.
Oh, I've seen Stranger Things.
Great show.
All the seasons so far.
Good plug. Fantastic show.
Shout out to Netflix for the sponsorship.
We'll finish that. We're gonna go now. Here's what's even crazier. So Burisch talks about all these experiences, and you're like, wow, that's a lot of crazy experiences. Masters wrote books about time travel and this theory, right?
Yeah.
But never really had like any personal experiences. This podcast, the Julian Dory podcast, he gets into this story about an experience he had at one of the conferences he went and spoke at. Yeah, it's really interesting. Let's check it out.
Okay.
And how he was being treated.
Because I was done skis with all this. I was ready to jet. I was traveling a lot. I was, doing too much. And the stress of not just that, but the existential questions. So I go down there, I give my talk, met this really interesting individual with a PhD who flew out to meet me to talk about his crazy ass experiences that he's been having, where he interacts with these beings who have indicated to him that they are from the future. And
they told him they're from the future? Have they said that?
They've articulated. A lot of people have. Yep. So I go to this conference, give my talk, meet with this guy who had his life saved by future humans, and then for some reason took like a 3-hour nap. I never take naps. I was one of the speakers at this thing. Go to this Halloween party downstairs because it was right before Halloween in 2022. I'm out of money, and one of the participants, she runs audio video, her name's Heidi, is like, hey, I have a key to the VIP room. We'll go up and get some beers, bring them back down. And at this point, it's now clear to me that Heidi wasn't necessarily Heidi. She wasn't the one saying that or the one doing this, because we went up to this room, get the beers, shoved a couple in my pockets for my friends downstairs, and then I wasn't allowed to leave. My friend Eric wants to talk to you. I'm like, who the hell is Eric? She's like, oh, don't worry, you'll like him. And she just kept saying that. I sat down in this chair, and then this Eric guy comes in. If we're reverse engineering these things, if we're in contact with the people creating them, hypothetically, if they are from our future, then yeah, it really makes you wonder what the level of interaction is. And then when you have experiencers who are also describing seeing these people in the same types of uniform we see military members walking in now, you got to wonder if people are working with them.
So it could be.
Yeah.
To solve their problem, they messed around with us even earlier than earlier when they had been treated as gods. They went back, treated as gods, went back before. They manipulated our original DNA. Reality could be mixed, which is why there are so many confusing data sets involving everything from fossil finds to strata. Why there are so many conundrums involving the speed of planetary formation. These things are happening simultaneously. that a planet can form at one rate and the reality can mix such that we can perceive it having formed at a separate rate.
You could look at something, are you saying that you could look at something one day and measure it, and look at it the next day, and the measurements can be different because a different timeline is then come into play?
Yeah. And biologists, chemists, well, natural philosophers call that error.
In the treaty that we have, what is it we're trying to work with, or they're trying to work with us to?
100% cooperation, 100% cooperation in getting rid of the ERBs in exchange for 100% cooperation to solve their physical problem and to attempt their rejoining. Where that will go, I'm not sure. However, the project under which I'm working right now may help some.
So Dan Burisch
Sure.
says
Yes. He
communication with these future humans is possible.
Uh-huh.
Michael Masters says that at a conference, he had what started out as a verbal conversation with a couple of people he didn't really know too well.
Yeah.
And eventually became telepathic. And that they told him, you need to continue with what you're doing.
You need to chill out, buddy.
Yeah, don't quit. Because he
Don't
wanted
quit.
to quit.
Don't stop.
So they told him, don't stop doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. They, quote unquote, implanted 3 things inside of his mind, but he can't access them yet.
That's the good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. What do you think about that?
I think, I mean, so do an X-ray, do an MRI, a CT scan, and show me the thing. No, I'm just kidding.
You mean
like it was a physical object?
The wave function?
Yeah, wouldn't that be interesting?
They have done studies like that, and they have seen activity in the brain during experiencers.
Yeah.
Mediums and things like that.
True. That's true. I guess we could. But what's the question to awaken that? Because that would only be triggered by somebody's brain, right?
Yeah. I mean, if consciousness is this way to plug in, does time matter? Could someone from another time plug into that consciousness and potentially send a message to a person from another time?
Yeah.
In another time.
Yeah.
Would that be possible, do you think?
Yeah, sure. I think so.
Like some of these, if you get into...
It's like, what it reminds me of? Sorry to interject. It's the person you mentioned about the submarine who was able to pinpoint that particular location.
Remote viewing, yeah. Project Paperclip.
Yep.
Or I'm sorry.
Oh, you really screwed
Project
that one
Stargate.
up.
I know, I get them all mixed up.
That was
but
embarrassing.
Yes,
That's
that was
bad.
the remote viewing program where they were able to locate submarines.
Yeah, I think it's similar in a way.
Yeah, it's all connected to consciousness. What's been your experience with that?
I'm a meditation nerd.
Okay.
Yeah. So I enjoy meditation quite a bit.
For remote viewing.
Yeah.
And some folks that do it say they've had some crazy experiences. Have you ever had any strange experiences doing stuff like that?
Yeah, I think we talked about it a little bit too. The moments of I guess it is thinking I'm in another room, but it's experiencing being in another room. And once you realize that you're in the wrong place, if you want to say it like that, then you're automatically, boom, you're right back where you were. Just this split second of not being where you are. So
and then once that kind of reality wavelength kicks in,
yeah,
boom, you're back
it's over.
to where you are.
Yeah.
And I think, that's the key they talk about in those papers is getting to that next level, and also maintaining yourself and not going crazy.
Yeah.
You know, because some folks, apparently they would go and they would see too much, and it would be really hard for them to come back from.
Oh, I bet.
And, you know, like in the Joe Rogan podcast and other podcasts, they talk about DMT experiences all the time and how it can be used to almost take you to this other level.
Yeah.
Where it's a completely different reality. It's brief. I've never done it. Apparently it's very brief, but it's almost like it takes you to another reality. And many people that go through that say it feels more real than reality.
Yeah.
So that's,
I think I understand. I understand the bliss of that.
yeah,
I think
it's,
you can
know,
get there during meditation, because I think it definitely takes you into that kind of unconscious.
absolutely.
Yeah.
When I was young, I had a monk give me a copy of the Bhagavad Gita. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it gets into a lot of stuff about meditation.
Yeah.
You know, that's where they'll pull a lot of the pictures from it where you know, like a monk that's so deep inside of a meditative state, he's like covered in spider webs and,
Yeah.
you know, just
Oh,
skin
I
and
see what you did
bones. Yeah, it's interesting that if you put in that energy, you could almost transcend what this existence is.
Yeah.
So yeah, if a future human could tap into that, why couldn't they go back and communicate with somebody back in time?
Yeah.
Especially if it was really, you know, important to the survival of the species.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a lot of these folks refer to is us surviving. So pretty interesting.
Why
stuff.
do you think that would be?
I think that for whatever reason, people are stuck on this idea of some kind of cataclysm. What do they call that? Extinction level event, an ELE.
Yeah.
I think
Everything's
you
got to
know,
have an acronym, right?
right.
Got
So
the
I
ELE?
think you got the ELE. I think it's, you know, whether that's man-made by nuclear war or whether it's a comet that smacks into us or, you know, we happen to tick off the wrong species. Like in my last video, there's a report of Russian soldiers that shot an anti-aircraft missile at a UFO and hit it.
Mm-hmm.
But then the species that came out turned into a big ball of energy and turned 23 of them into stone.
Oh, I remember you mentioning that. Yeah.
Limestone.
I don't believe that.
Incredible.
I get that.
Hey, whether you believe it or not, it's in the files of the CIA. Not everything that's in there is accurate, but they thought it was interesting enough to keep on file. So that to me speaks a lot. Okay, so let's carry on here. We're jumping back to Dan Burisch a little bit, and what he had to say.
Classic.
JB about the two different timelines and then how that got all screwed up. And to me, it seems like if you mess with time, you're gonna start screwing things up.
I get that.
You know?
Yeah.
I remember the Arnold movies in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
I won't name them because I don't want to get like blocked or something. But you know those movies. I always thought those movies were interesting because it was like, what was first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
You know, he goes back and they have the baby, but the baby also sent him back. So like the chicken, you know, what happened first? The different paradoxes and you know, quantum physics.
Yeah.
The different theories there with different multi-dimensions and things like that. I think it's all very fascinating. And you know, maybe Dan and Michael are just smacking us right in the face with it, the reality of it. And it's hard, you know, to hear stuff like that and actually believe it.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting to think that some people are already able to experience that same thing if they're experiencing something that we're not capable of, for most of us at least.
Yeah. Yeah, I know I'm not. At least I haven't tried, but
Yeah.
I know that there's nothing. And it's also interesting. It kind of ties to the Jake Barber psionics thing, where they're able to, you know, kind of summon these craft out of nowhere. They've got the 9 different craft classifications. I know we talked about it a little bit. We watched that video. I had the jellyfish and the tic tac and all that stuff.
Yeah. They call it the classic tic tac.
The classic tic tac. That's
Yeah.
right. And what was interesting was, they had 2 psionic operators out there in the middle of the desert they were each laying on a cot in a sleeping bag pulled over their head with blindfolds on, and in that state were able to summon these craft.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know any other word for it. I can't wait to see more data about it.
Do you feel
fascinating.
like there's a possibility that even going beyond seeing that physical thing, don't you think that there's an existence beyond that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think I think a lot of things. The problem is I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. There's so many different folks out there that are super intelligent, way beyond my level of comprehension.
Like none of this we're experiencing is remotely close.
Right. Right. And super intelligent people will tell you this is basically a matrix.
Yeah.
Everything we're experiencing is just a hologram. Because it's interesting. It gets you to start comprehending life and existence. And,
yeah, that's a good thing.
All those deep things.
And I think if you continue down that path, that potentially you can experience more and more drops of that. I think you can.
Yeah, I would hope so.
It's the same experience. Meditating or just going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
To a degree.
I would hope so. I mean, you mentioned that, and it's interesting because a lot of the folks, you go back to the 60s, 70s, and 80s, a lot of those folks that were investigating this phenomena back then are now involved in, meditation sessions, kind of that next level energy connection. They all kind of wind up there. And I do find that really interesting. That's a good point.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep on with this video. And you tell me what you think as we wrap it up here.
Let's bring it home.
Let's bring it home, baby.
How can we explain seeing in the same place literally human looking, and grays, if based, and maybe I misunderstood this, but based on what you were saying earlier about over time and things changing, that would suggest that those 2 beings are from very different future realms, meaning one, I'm just throwing random numbers out, one could be 200 years from now, another could be 200,000 years from now.
Yeah, exactly. And I coined a term for that, temporal ancestry, that is people coming back from different times or working together from different times for likely different purposes. You've got the humanoid, human-looking, human form, short grays, tall grays, hybrids. Every single one of those is an upright walking biped. It's that if what's getting out of these ships is some kind of squid or octopus or spider-looking creature, I never would have given 2 shits about this because there's no connection to us. So, importantly, all walking upright, all bipedal, therefore, we would classify them all as hominin. If we are reproducing with them, that's where the hybrid part comes in. Based on the biological classification of species concept, we're the same fucking species. You can't reproduce with something that you don't share the requisite genes with in order to make an offspring. And so there's a lot that indicates that they are us just from that alone.
Sure. Close-knit, very well-ordered society, one which is numerologically based, one which speaks to others that were called brothers, that I now find out are those who left on a spiritual path to another location, to the famed Duat, Orion, head-to-toe physiology, including real autopsy photographs, not the Santilli kind, but the real autopsy photographs. The Brookings Institute paper was present.
So Dan Burisch talks a lot about this report, the report by the Brookings Institution that was created in December of 1960. The report is titled Proposed Studies on the Implications of Peaceful Space Activities for Human Affairs. It's a little over 240 some odd pages. I did go through and actually read the entire report. Most of it is nothing really crazy, stuff that you would expect for a report on future space travel, things to consider from a project and program management perspective as far as costs, people's motivations to essentially want to dump money into this program, space travel, when they could be spending taxpayers' money on what might be considered more important things that directly impact us now. A lot of study on that. When the Brookings Institute gets into how folks are going to respond to some type of non-human interaction or extraterrestrial interaction, they do mention a couple things that really sparked a lot of folks to think, hey, maybe the government is covering up something. I'm going to go ahead and show you some of the main things here. It is conceivable that there is semi-intelligent life in some of or part of our solar system, or highly intelligent life which is not technologically oriented, and many cosmologists and astronomers think it very likely that there is intelligent life in many other solar systems. So that part's not that concerning, right? But then we get into this other section. And this is a section that really has stirred up a lot of controversy. An individual's reaction to such a radio contact, meaning a radio contact from outer space, would in part depend on his cultural, religious, and social background, as well as on the actions of those he considered authorities and leaders, and their behavior in turn would in part depend on their cultural, social, and religious environment. The degree of political or social repercussion would probably depend on leadership's interpretation of 1, its own role, 2, threats to that role, and 3, national and personal opportunities to take advantage of the disruption or reinforcement of the attitudes and values of others. Since leadership itself might have great need to gauge the direction and intensity of public attitudes to strengthen its own morale, and for decision-making purposes, it would be most advantageous to have more to go on, about personal opinions about the opinion of the public and other leadership groups. The knowledge that life existed in other parts of the universe might lead to a greater unity of man on Earth, based on the oneness of man, or on the age-old assumption that any stranger is threatening. The fact that such beings existed might become simply one of the facts of life, but probably not one calling for action. Anthropological files contain many examples of societies, sure of their place in the universe, which disintegrated when they have had to associate with previously unfamiliar societies espousing different ideas and different life ways. Others that survived such an experience usually did so by paying the price of change in values and attitudes and behavior. And finally, the most shocking part of this report comes on page 184. Continuing studies to determine emotional and intellectual understanding and attitudes, and successive alterations of them, if any, regarding the possibility and consequences of discovering intelligent extraterrestrial life. historical and empirical studies of the behavior of peoples and their leaders when confronted with dramatic and unfamiliar events or social pressures. How might such information, under what circumstances, be presented to or withheld from the public for what ends? What might be the role of the discovering scientists and other decision makers regarding release of the fact that we have discovery? So that is why Dan Burisch refers to this report quite a bit. You can see that they basically lay out there may be just a requirement for secrecy to avoid panic, quote unquote, basically disintegration of the society. It's pretty interesting food for thought, and I think it gave, us folks that believe in this kind of UFO, what may be cover up, and something to point to say, look, this isn't just craziness. This was a Brookings Institute report saying, essentially, that was commissioned by the government, telling the government, look, you might need to keep this secret because people might panic. Tell me what you think down in the comments about that Brookings Institute report.
And I was told which numbers I was allowed to open up. Most of the stuff, they had everything from military applications, the physics of the craft, and I couldn't have cared less. I was more interested in taking in the biology issues. Just doesn't interest me. Aside from the fact, from the biophysiological interface between the hand, mind, and the craft, and allows the J-Rod to have direct interface with the craft. When I read the word extraterrestrial, I tunnel visioned. And when I finally believed and understood that it was, in fact, an extraterrestrial, none. There's been exchanges going on since they spoke with us in 41. They wish to find a resolution to the broken resonance between they and the other half of they, the so-called Orions and the Reticulans. They also wish to, for fear of extinction, have a relief of the paraprotein-related problem. But the exchange process is to solve the problem to prevent what went wrong in 2012. Rogue, if you will, group of the J-Rods are not cooperating with that. But a deal has been brokered for the T9 treaty to be held in abeyance until 2005. Once that's upped, they are supposed to come under the auspices of the general agreement between the Committee of the Majority and their respective societies. If so, nothing will get turned on aside from what nature and God is providing us in 2012, and we won't separate.
This exchange, and we're kind of curious as to what are we going to get?
Oh, we're going to get not wiped out. The biggest problem is to make sure that there are no human-created ERB
Stargates?
machines.
Machines?
Yeah, that sounds science fiction-ish,
I know.
okay, and it's hokey sounding, okay? To make sure that there are none of them in existence which can automatically turn on. I do know that failure would result in too much energy being directed at our planet from our star.
So yeah, I don't know. I do get the sense that we're sort of being led, we as in Congress in the United States, is being led to do something ahead of something that is coming. Historically, it was guiding away from. Now, even if they are meant to be disseminating information, I think it's less disinformation and misinformation, which was what they were doing over the last 70 years. And now it's probably just information. And I think it's less of a push and more of a pull from the visitors themselves. Right. After this happened to me, I had to try to figure out what the fuck this is and what this physical existence is and how it relates to this broader awareness of a different thing outside this physical reality.
And to be clear, the guy, Eric, the guy you were talking to, if I understood that correctly, he's basically saying he's a future human.
No, not at all.
So I missed that.
That was my initial thought because they knew the future. They knew my future. So I assumed that individual and their consciousness was who knew that. Eric, I didn't know what word to use for Eric because I didn't know what he was or who he was. He's open about this. Heidi also willing to tell her story. I don't think she enjoys doing it as much, but Eric is really trying to help people because he does have abilities that I think stem from his UFO encounter that allowed him to shoot that information into my brain, just bursting from the inside with all of this emotion and confusion and ontological shock, essentially. Eric comes around the corner. There's no reason for him to have been there at that time. Comes around the corner, puts his hand on my shoulder and says, "Are you okay?" And I'm just like, Like my brain was just mush, but it did take away a lot of that because I was on a panel that same day. I had to function, the end of conference banquet was happening. There's a lot of stuff that I needed to exist in this physical reality for. It started out, again, vocalized. And then, like I said, I didn't even really notice that it turned telepathic. But then eventually I did. I'm like, okay, this is weird. But everything was already weird leading up to it from the very first thing they did, tell me they knew what was in my brain. But then, it was kind of this accelerating curve of the speed at which it happened and the understanding. And it was kind of like a remembering.
That there was an obvious illusion. There was an obvious illusion here in the testimony to the Honorable Vice Admiral McConnell.
Right.
Two situations which were going on during the 1950s involving the present relationship between we and the extraterrestrial species. Yeah.
In other words,
they removed the equipment because the history indicated that the equipment was operating during the time of the catastrophe and was a proximate cause to the catastrophe by increasing the amount of energy into our asthenosphere and causing a global catastrophe. If they don't have our best interest at heart, how would our removing that equipment prevent the catastrophe that we're hearing about from three different cultures? Meaning the Orions, the J-Rods, and the J-Rods from earlier times. How would removing that equipment proximate the catastrophe? Only leaving the equipment in place would be the dangerous move. They are aware that our emotions affect our state, our physical state, that our orientation to the energies which are available from the cosmos, if you will, affect the state of our DNA, affect the state of our health, and they are applying that as an experimental protocol, a rubric, if you will, to change the state of the people on board so that they can sample them for biological material. Trying to ameliorate their own neuropathology, which is already starting and is becoming an issue within their populace at their timeline concerning reproduction.
Dan Burisch and
Tell you what.
Mike Masters, holy moly, right?
Tell you what.
What are your thoughts on that?
All right. Dan, he's not convincing me. I gotta know more. I'm interested in this telepathy thing.
Oh yeah,
This scenario.
with Michael Masters.
Yeah.
What interests you about it?
So started out as a conversation, moved over into telepathic conversation. So he says, "You know what I want to know? What was it like when the conversation ended?"
Afterwards?
Yeah, I want to know what the feeling was when he realized they were communicating telepathically.
I can tell you what he said on a podcast.
Yeah? Oh, okay. Here we go.
What he said is that it was a conference, also a Halloween party deal.
Yeah.
So he was walking down the hallway and he's asked if he's okay. He's all discombobulated. And the story he gives after that is that he goes to his hotel room and cries for 13 hours.
Ah, interesting. Okay. That's what I want to know. For some reason, I really wanted to know what that was like. I feel like that is kind of what I expected.
Yeah,
Kind of
would
like
that
a
be your response?
catastrophic response. Yeah.
Yeah, your whole head
Whether it's
was
good or
just-
bad, it's just like, whoop, that was too much.
Your whole reality was just changed in a matter of a couple hours, right?
Yeah.
You know, he also goes on to say, you know, I know you kind of chuckled when they talked about implanting the 3 things in his brain. He was on another podcast because he was kind of making the rounds because of his book release. And he said on that podcast that, you know, if what's there is to do with something catastrophic where I'm going to experience something awful, I'd rather not know it now.
Yeah.
I'd rather know it when I need to know it. And maybe that's what it is, which is kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
But that's what he said.
Yeah.
The telepathy thing, he kind of describes it as, you know, like he said, they were talking and then all of a sudden they weren't. And they were just sharing thoughts.
Yeah.
I never had a telepathic conversation. I don't know.
Me neither.
But you have had out-of-body experiences, which is a lot closer than I've ever been to that level.
There's, you know, there's a lot of people that do particular types of meditation and then they end up, you know, getting lost, like mentally lost. And I think
Interesting.
I think there's definitely some truth to the fact that it's not all good. You know, sometimes we can't handle that experience. So I assume that was kind of like that.
Do you
what he
think it's
experienced.
all just inside of our own brain, or are we actually tapping into something else?
So again, that's why I asked about why it would be. There's a little bit where maybe it's not even that exciting that, oh, we saw a UFO, we saw a physical thing.
Right.
Is there, who cares about that when it's all of it is, it's not really in here, but it's, you know, everywhere.
Right. I mean, you think about it, it's all electrical.
Yeah.
Right. All of the,
I like that. Yep.
yeah, all the firings of neurons and, you know, everything down our spinal cord, all the way to our fingertips. It's all just electrical impulse.
That interconnectedness of, what is it, like mushrooms, right?
Yeah.
Or plant life in itself.
Yeah. The mushrooms are crazy.
I think that kind of exists.
Yeah.
For all,
so
all of this.
that's something to ponder. I think that, yes, absolutely. I think our viewers will appreciate that insight and hopefully take something positive away from this.
And your brains don't explode.
Yes, because, you know, I said it in my first video, whether there's future humans traveling here or not, we know that it's us that's in control of our future, one way or another. So pay attention, stay diligent. Unknown alien person, aka UAP.
You know it.
Thank you for stopping by and shedding your insight, buddy.
You got it. Take care of yourself.
We'll see you next time. Say hello to Unknown Caller Man for me. Hey everyone. I hope you had as much fun watching that episode as we did making it. As far as, do I believe if future humans are traveling through our timeline or not? I do. I think if we ever do figure out time travel, then we've already figured it out and it's already happening. Does it explain everything? All the crazy events out there? I don't know. But I do believe it's happening. So that's where I fall on the whole matter. Let me know where you fall on the matter down below in the comment section. I would really love to hear about it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, everyone. I appreciate you tuning in. Have a great night, and we'll see you next time on the Living Umpqua UFO UAP show.